In most states, you have to have what they call a meat handler's license. That license requires you, or that license is required to pick up meat from a state or USDA inspected facility and transport it to your consumer. Now, this doesn't apply for those of you who are packaging meat with a meat handler's license, giving that meat to the Postal Service to transfer to a consumer on the other side of the country. For whatever reason, UPS, USPS, they're not required to have a meat handler's license, but the guy that's picking it up in the cooler at the USDA facility is required to have a meat handler's license to go across town. To get this meat handler license, they're often required to have some sort of commercial storage building with coolers and freezers in it, even if the meat never goes back to their farm, even if they're just delivering it straight to their consumer, their buyer. And sometimes, you have to have that facility and all of your freezers and everything inspected by the USDA and the state to get the license. Tell me how many small farmers you know are willing to go through this much trouble. Now, I'm not in office in any kind of way, but if I were to run, I would say deregulation done right here. I understand that everybody has to have licenses for things. There has to be oversight. The government needs to completely control our lives. That's just part of the way things are. But why not, if we are truly in this beef crisis to the point where we have to import 4 times the beef from Argentina to help out a consumer by a few pennies, because it's not going to make that much of a difference at the grocery store. It's just hammering U.S. ranchers. Why don't we just deregulate a little bit more, okay? Or why don't we change the licensing structure? So like, for example, you can get a delivery license where you're a farmer, you sell your beef. When the beef is ready, or your hog is ready, or whatever your animal you're having processed, lamb is ready, you can pick it up. You have a license to deliver it in a cooler to the end consumer same day. Boom. Right there, you unlock a significant amount of potential within the marketplace. I know tons of farmers who don't have a meat handler's license, don't want to get in trouble, so they just don't do it. But if they could pick up the meat and take it directly to their end buyer, because a lot of buyers don't want to have to drive out to these remote locations where these slaughterhouses are to pick up their meat. If they could offer that service to their buyers, they would make a significant amount of money. And it would add a significant amount of protein to the marketplace. We'll get to those numbers in a minute. With drop shipping, I was just talking about this. There are people shipping meat, to customers around the country, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think, as we become into this digital age, your communities, you have online communities, you have, local communities. There's nothing wrong with wanting to support your local community and receive beef from them. So if you have to have a license to bring it back to your farm and package it and ship it across the country, but the shipping companies aren't required to have a license, one of the things that we could do is allow USDA facilities to offer that as a service to farmers. They offer a storage fee that, farmers could pay, increase storage capacity through some of this funding that she's talking about, and allow, a facility to offer a drop shipping service for a farmer to be able to ship their meat across the country. Now, if you're smart, you can make this work so that you're selling online, and as you're having animals processed, they get shipped out the same day. I'm sure that somebody has thought about this from an entrepreneurial standpoint, but I'm sure that the licensing burdens with the USDA just make it impossible for them to do that. So at least open the door for it. You might find some people being very creative, some processors, some local USDA processors being creative with ways that they can expand their business model by not just increasing their slaughter capacity, but increasing their storage capacity to offer a shipping service to other customers. I'm not saying everybody's going to want to do that, but it's another way, another opportunity. I also think there's got to be a way to allow farms to have meat handlers licenses with a shared facility. So for example, if like 3 or 4 farmers came together and said, we want to build this facility, we want to put freezers in it, we're splitting the costs. I think that might be legal in some states, but it might not be legal in all places. But just, clarification of that and making that an option. And I think that it would be helpful to have some sort of national cooler standards, so that it's a standard that can replace state standards across the board to make it just simpler for people to understand. So I said, let's talk about the numbers. Okay, so there are over 600,000, about 622,000 cattle farmers across the United States. Most of these cattle farmers have less than 50 cows. If you look at, how many farms there are in the United States, there's a lot of small farms, and you have these big mega farms, right? These big mega ranches. But there's a lot of small ranches with fewer than 50 cows. And these are the ranchers who are really kind of left out by the licensing system. If you figure just 5% of those farms being able to sell direct, you deregulate enough that just 5% could sell direct to consumer. And each of them sold, let's say, just 5 more animals a year. I mean, we're not talking big numbers here. That's 155,000 head of additional cattle going into the protein supply. And like I said, this also applies to pork, lamb, all the other proteins. Deregulation would impact all of this all the way down the board. And I'm talking 5%, 155,000 more head of cattle. That's 77 million more pounds of beef. And I know we're talking about trillions of pounds when we're dealing with Argentina, but I'm also just throwing out a number of 5%. Now you combine that with everything that Rollins put out in her white paper, which is fantastic. I think it's the best thing we've seen in a long time. But you combine that with that program, and within a few years, you have a boom in production, a boom in protein availability. I think we're looking at numbers like in the 500 million pounds of more beef in the marketplace in a short period of time. So you could quickly turn around and increase, I think, the national supply by 2% a year. Working with American farmers and ranchers through deregulation, we've seen an 8% drop since 2019. And that's where you're seeing the beef prices go up. So some of these numbers, they sound insignificant. They don't sound that big. But when you actually kind of dig into it and you start looking at all the different pieces to it, it doesn't take I mean, you can do it without having to import a bunch of stuff from another country. It is very doable. And the consumer ends up having way more options. If they're able to buy direct from farms, and buying bulk, it does take a lot of money up front, but you do save a lot from all the cuts and pieces that you're buying at the grocery store.